It's 7:30 p.m. across India, live from New Delhi. You're watching DDI Global. We'll get your top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Benji Haya. Benji, good evening from New Delhi.
Good morning, Tenny. Good morning, Tenny. I'm here in Washington, D.C. 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, a tit-for-tat of terse political terms over Russia's nuclear drills that Ukraine perceives as a dangerous threat, and former US President Donald Trump back in court. All that and more after the latest headlines.
French President Emmanuel Macron and EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen pressed China's Xi Jinping to ensure fair trade during talks in Paris. Also hopes Beijing to influence Moscow to end their aggression against Ukraine.
We count on China to use all its influence on Russia to end Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin orders tactical nuclear weapon drills to deter the West. Ukraine calls the threat nuclear blackmail. Israeli military begins evacuating Palestinian civilians from parts of Rafah ahead of a possible attack on Hamas targets. US President Joe Biden to speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu later today. Preparations in place for the third phase of India's general elections on Tuesday. 93 seats go to polls in the third phase, over 1,300 candidates in the fray. First news from Europe. Chinese President Xi Jinping met his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Paris today. The two leaders shook hands at the Élysée Palace as Macron welcomed Xi in the French capital for a rare visit against the backdrop of mounting trade tensions with the European Union. Emmanuel Macron urged his Chinese counterpart to reduce trade imbalances and to use his influence with Russia to end the war in Ukraine.
As agreed, I propose to first address Euro-Chinese relations, which will allow us to discuss trade issues such as access to markets and conditions of fair competition, investment and harmonious development. And secondly, we will discuss Ukraine and the Middle East, two major crises where coordination between us is absolutely decisive.
Following an earlier meeting with the Chinese and French presidents in Paris on Monday, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that China could limit the irresponsible proliferation of Iranian missiles and drones, alongside reiterating calls for a ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. DD India's Ross Cullen sent us this report from Paris for more on the talks.
Well, this is the first visit by the Chinese president to Europe since 2019, and he spent Monday morning local time in discussions with Emmanuel Macron, his host, but also President Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission, because there are trade tensions at the moment between Europe and China. We know that Beijing has launched its own anti-dumping investigation into French brandy exports. Europe is investigating Chinese subsidies related to wind turbines, solar panels, electric cars, also into China's procurement of medical devices. So there is a bit of a fraught situation when it comes to the commercial situation between Paris, Brussels and Beijing, hoping that they're able to sort that out, because Ursula von der Leyen saying on Monday morning local time that we must avoid misunderstandings. She went on to say we must address these issues responsibly. We cannot have state-induced overcapacity, unequal market access and over-dependencies. Monday afternoon local time is when it will be the chance for Emmanuel Macron and Xi Jinping to have one-on-one bilateral discussions, and that comes after And they visit Invalides, which is a former military hospital. Resplendent in gold is where Napoleon is buried. So there are formal ceremonies ongoing throughout Monday here in Paris to celebrate and mark the visit by the Chinese president. And it will be culminating later in a state dinner. In Paris, Ross Cullen reporting for DD India.
Now, in the latest from the Israel-Hamas conflict, a Hamas official said in a statement on Monday that any Israeli military operation in the city of Rafah in southern Gaza will put ceasefire negotiations in jeopardy. Evacuations are underway in Rafah since Israel has called on Palestinian civilians to leave the region as part of a limited scope operation. The Israeli Defense Forces have said that it has expanded a humanitarian area in Al-Mawasi to accommodate the increased levels of aid flowing into Gaza. Speaking to his US counterpart Lloyd Austin, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant linked the Rafah operation to deadlock in truce talks, which he blamed on Hamas. Gallant told Austin that Hamas has refused the frameworks at hand. He added that military action in Rafah is required due to the lack of an alternative. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden is expected to meet Jordan's King Abdullah II at the White House today with prospects for a Gaza ceasefire. Joe Biden is also expected to speak with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So, as Israel's Prime Minister is expected to speak with US President Joe Biden in the coming hours ahead of an Israeli operation in Rafah, something the administration has warned against for months. DD India's Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv.
Well, there's panic, confusion and fear on the ground in the Gaza Strip among some 100,000 Palestinians who are sheltering down in the east of Rafah, with the Israeli military saying it's about to carry out a limited scope operation, saying it will use extreme force in the east of Rafah. Now, the IDF has been publishing maps and dropping leaflets telling people to get out now and to go to Al-Mawasi, which is down in the south of Gaza, but on the Mediterranean Sea, and also for people to go to a so-called humanitarian area in Khan Yunis, which is just north of Rafah. Now, and this comes after another incident late yesterday, which saw Hamas and also Palestinian Islamic Jihad fire some 10 rockets at the Kerem Shalom crossing area, a vital area that was facilitating humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, killing 4 Israeli soldiers and wounding 10 others. So certainly it appears as though this long-feared, long-awaited Israeli ground operation down in Rafah is starting to move ahead. We've heard from Hamas, which is calling this a dangerous escalation which will have consequences, adding that this will not be a picnic for Israeli soldiers. Reporting from Tel Aviv, I'm Sarah Coates for DD India.
And on to the other bigger conflict in Europe. Russia said on Monday that the United States and its European allies are pushing the world to the brink of confrontation between nuclear powers by supporting Ukraine. My colleague Benji Haya is in Washington, D.C. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Benji, Russia raising its nuclear posture yet
Good morning.
again.
Russia's holding military exercises on Monday that include practice for the use of tactical nuclear weapons. The Kremlin claims the drills are a response to statements from the West on sending troops to Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov citing the recent comments made by French President Emmanuel Macron on possibly sending soldiers to the war zone, saying the issue would legitimately arise if Russia broke through Ukrainian front lines. Ukraine calls the nuclear drills nothing more than Russia's continuing nuclear blackmail. But the Russian Defense Ministry insists these drills are aimed at ensuring their territorial integrity and sovereignty. DD India's Dasha Chernyshovka sent us this report from Moscow.
Russia's general staff is now preparing for the drills that will include the practice for the use of the tactical nuclear weapons. On Monday, the Ministry of Defense said that would be happening on the orders of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is expected to be inaugurated for his fifth term as president of the country on Tuesday. Now, we understand that the drills will involve the use of the military units from the Southern Military District, the use of aviation as well as naval forces, and it is aimed, according to the Ministry of Defense statement, at ensuring Russia's territorial integrity and sovereignty. All that is happening against the backdrop of the sour ties between Moscow and the West, and the Russian Ministry of Defense says that is happening in response to the provocative statements that Moscow has heard from the Western countries, from the Western officials. So Moscow has been saying long before that Moscow is monitoring all of the statements coming from the Western countries, and most recently Moscow has said it has recorded an escalation in the rhetoric regarding the West's participation and involvement into the conflict in Ukraine.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU's looking at China to influence Russia to end its long-standing conflict with Ukraine. Her statement comes following a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday.
We agree that Europe and China have a shared interest in peace and security. We count on China to use all its influence on Russia to end Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. President Xi has played an important role in de-escalating Russia's irresponsible nuclear threats, and I'm confident that President Xi will continue to do so against the backdrop of the ongoing nuclear threats by Russia.
To the US, and Donald Trump's ongoing criminal trial in New York is underway again. We await to see who prosecutors will call first to the stand this morning. They allege that he falsified business records to cover up an affair with an adult film star and keep the story out the news at the height of his presidential campaign, an attempt, they say, to influence the outcome of the 2016 election. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to all charges. He was fined $9,000 by the judge last week for violating a gag order. That judge now says he'll consider jail time for additional violations after ruling that those fines are not working as a deterrent. This is one of 4 criminal trials Mr. Trump faces as he vies for the Oval Office again.
He's taken away my constitutional right to speak. I was in Miami this weekend, and reporters are asking me questions, the same questions like you're asking me, and I have to say I have a gag order, I can't speak about it. Never happened before, ever. Number one. Number two, it's a fake trial. They have no case, and it's been absolutely proven now. They have no case whatsoever. This is Alvin Bragg doing it for political reasons for Biden. This is a Biden trial. He's a crooked president.
Voters in Chad are heading to the polls today in the first presidential election since a wave of coups and 3 years after a military leader took power in the African country. Mahamat Idris Deby, who seized office the day rebels killed his long-ruling father back in April 2021, has promised to bolster security, strengthen the rule of law and increase electricity production. Monday's vote pits him against his prime minister, previously a political opponent who fled into exile in 2022 but was allowed back a year later. DD India's Ajay Mangut reports from Abuja.
Polls opened at about 7 a.m. local time and are expected to close at 5 p.m. According to the country's electoral body, more than 8 million people registered to vote in the elections that will see a transition from military to democratic rule. 10 candidates, including transitional President Mahamat Idris Deby Itno, are contesting in the election. Yaya Dillo, an opposition politician who had been expected to run against Deby, was shot and killed in the capital Jamena in February, the day the election date was announced. The winner of the election is expected to garner 50% of the votes. If no candidate wins more than 50% of the votes, a runoff will be held on June 22nd. Provisional results are expected by May 21st and final results by June 5th. Ajay Mangut in Abuja, reporting for DD India.
Astronaut Nita Williams and her fellow veteran NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore are getting ready to fly to the International Space Station late on Monday night on a brand new spacecraft. The launch is scheduled from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. The flight test will carry those astronauts to the space station for a week to test the Starliner craft before NASA certifies a transportation system for future missions. The flight, if it succeeds, will become the second private firm being able to provide crew transport to and from the ISS. That's it from me here in Washington. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Benji. Benji Hire joining us all from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on the show. Highlighting a united NATO, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visits German troops deployed in Lithuania. And ushering in spring, the Kakava festival brings hope across Turkey and the Balkans.
Team Poll Pulse has reached Ahmedabad. Gujarat is BJP's bastion, home turf of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. All eyes are on whether the BJP can have a hat-trick in 2024.
It will be much better when अगर हमें जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटी अहमदाबाद में ही मिल जाए.
हम लेडीज़ है तो हम कभी भी रात को 12 बजे भी अगर जॉब के हिसाब से घर जाए तो हमको लगना चाहिए कि नहीं हम पूरे सेफ कंट्री में रह रहे हैं.
Join us as we track the pulse of Indian democracy.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Up next, we get you the latest on the world's largest democratic exercise underway in India. So the third phase of India's elections will be held on Tuesday, the 7th of May, with voters in 93 constituencies across 10 states and 1 union territory going to polls. Elaborate arrangements are in place, with polling parties being dispatched to their respective polling booths. All 25 seats of Gujarat, 14 seats of Karnataka, 11 seats of Maharashtra, 10 seats of Uttar Pradesh and a union territory of Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu will go to polls in this phase. As many as 1,351 candidates are in the fray for the third phase of polls. Fates of many important leaders, including senior BJP leader and Home Minister Amit Shah, rebel BJP leader K.S. Ishwarappa, Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, Samajwadi Party's Dimple Yadav, former Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan and NCP Sharad Chandra Pawar leader Supriya Sule will be sealed in the ballot boxes. Campaigning for the fourth phase of India's Lok Sabha elections scheduled for May 13th, that has gained momentum as political leaders are holding rallies and roadshows across the nation. In order to garner support of voters in the favour of their party candidates, senior BJP leader and Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Odisha this morning and also went to neighbouring state of Andhra Pradesh. The Indian Prime Minister held a rally in Odisha's Behrampur where he exuded confidence that the BJP will win the elections and will emerge as a new hope for the people of the state.
ओडिशा में बीजेडी अस्त है, कांग्रेस पस्त है और लोग बीजेपी पर आश्वस्त है और सिर्फ भाजपा उम्मीदों का नया सूरज बनकर आई है.
The Indian Prime Minister also addressed a rally in Nabarangpur in Odisha, where he talked about his government's commitment to root out corruption through direct benefit transfer scheme to the people. Opposition leaders have also hit the campaign trail, traversing the length and breadth of the country, seeking support for their candidates. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi addressed a rally in Ratlam in the central Indian state of Madhya Pradesh, where he categorically talked about holding a caste census if voted to power. While the Congress candidate from Northeast Delhi, Kanhaiya Kumar, filed his nomination today, voting in Delhi is scheduled for May 25th in the 6th phase of the general election. 4 parliamentary seats of West Bengal will go to polls on Tuesday. Among them, Murshidabad and Jangipur have a history of poll violence. Security has been beefed up in these constituencies. DD India's Gautam Roy reports.
West Bengal has a history of electoral violence, and the third phase of polling in the state is different. At least 25 crude bombs have been found and destroyed by the police since Saturday, ahead of Tuesday's polling in Murshidabad parliamentary seat, where elections are being held along with Jangipur, Uttar and Dakshin Malda. Checking of vehicles has been intensified in the run-up to the voting, and anti-social elements are being monitored. Over 60,000 central and nearly an equal number of state police personnel have been deployed for ensuring peaceful elections.
We are looking forward to a peaceful and free and fair elections. We have tried our best to put such arrangements. The district police has tried their best to put such arrangements so as to ensure a free and fair and, most importantly, violence-free elections. Let us hope for the best.
Monday also saw the deployment of thousands of polling personnel to almost 4,000 polling stations in Murshidabad and Jangipur seats from Beharampur.
An entire stadium has been requisitioned for the deployment of thousands of polling personnel, as you can see, for the conduct of elections in 2 parliamentary seats in Murshidabad and Jangipur. All the polling personnel are here. They're collecting all that they need. It's a long and exhaustive list, but these polling personnel are dedicated to their duty of conducting free and fair elections in India.
The personnel queued up to collect polling materials and EVMs, double-checking all requirements and details.
There is a long checklist here, we are giving them food, water, or VVPAT, ballot unit, control unit, everything which is needed in their polling station. All things are here given.
It's my first time, so I am a little bit nervous, but I am also excited. It's like a festival, and everybody is very helpful, and they are, assisting us. Whenever we are, facing any difficulties, they are solving it immediately.
Polling begins sharp at 7 a.m. on Tuesday. From personnel to voters, all are looking forward to the festival of democracy. With camera person Uttam Singh, Gautam Roy in Murshidabad for DD India.
So more on the poll preparedness for tomorrow. Anurag Goyal, Chief Electoral Officer for Assam, has said that the state is fully geared up for the upcoming polls. DD India correspondent Tapas Bhattacharya has sent us this report.
Assam stands poised for a momentous occasion. Phase 3 of the Lok Sabha elections will take place on Tuesday. Chief Electoral Officer Assam Anurag Goyal said that his office is working on every aspect of the electoral process and is conducted with fairness.
By and large, the elections in Assam have been peaceful so far in the first 2 phases, and with the blessings of the citizens of Assam, we have been able to conduct it in a fairly transparent manner, and with a high voter percentage turnout, nearly 80% in both the phases. The third phase, we are looking at a voting percentage of more than 85-86% on the average, while I think Dhubri is likely to go beyond 90%.
There are 9,516 polling stations. Among them, 84 are model polling stations. 14 polling stations managed by persons with webcasting will be done over 5,266 polling stations.
There are almost 9,516 polling stations which we have set up, and but many of them are in difficult areas or areas, riverine areas near international borders, where we had to send around 343 polling parties yesterday on P-2. In fact, those are the areas which are far-flung. Today also in the early hours the weather was inclement, but the weather improved in the daytime, and therefore all the polling parties have been dispatched from the locations by around 2 p.m. And as per information just which I had received is around that 4,775 polling stations, parties have reached their locations.
Chief Electoral Officer also assured of minimum facilities from drinking water to ramps for persons with disability voters. 47 candidates are vying for victory and over 8.1 million electors will decide their fate.
All preparation have been done and no stone will be unturned to make sure that voters come out in large numbers. With camera person Naveen, this is Taposh Bhattacharya for DD India from Assam.
And after feeling India's poll pulse, we now take a look at what else is happening around the world. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visited Lithuania to show Germany's commitment to its NATO allies. By visiting German troops stationed there, Scholz signalled a change in the German security policy. The presence of a German brigade in Lithuania demonstrates Germany's active role in strengthening NATO's eastern defences. Scholz's visit highlights the importance of a united NATO in addressing security challenges. China on Monday urged the Philippines to cease activities at disputed atolls in the South China Sea, following several confrontations, including the Chinese Coast Guard using water cannons against Filipino vessels. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Chian said that the Philippines should stop, quote, intruding into the waters of the islands in the South China Sea. Heavy rains battering Brazil's southernmost state of Rio Grande do Sul have killed at least 83 people, while more than 100 were still missing. The storms have affected more than two-thirds of nearly 500 cities in the state, leaving about 122,000 people displaced. Renowned Hollywood actor Sylvester Stallone is set to auction a portion of his prestigious luxury watch collection in New York this June. The collection, spanning decades, features timepieces from brands such as Cartier, Audemars Piguet, Rolex and Panerai, the latter of which Stallone famously promoted, elevating its global recognition. And as we wind up this edition of DD India Global, we bring you glimpses of the Kakava festival, an enchanting tradition embraced by the Romani community across Turkey and the Balkans. From the lively streets of northwestern Edirne emerges a celebration of spring, promising hope and abundance for the year ahead. So that's it for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles on Facebook, X and Instagram at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms.